I'm Celeste Rodriguez, 28 years old, and 3 weeks ago, I walked into my parents' 30th high school reunion, wearing a $10,000 designer dress, paid for with money from the company I built after they abandoned me. The look of pure terror in their eyes when they saw me was worth every sleepless night I'd endured building my empire. But what happened next? What I revealed about their perfect marriage and the family secret they'd hidden for decades, that changed everything. The entire Rodriguez family legacy crumbled in one evening. Before we dive into this revenge story that's been brewing for 10 years, I have to ask, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. And if you're ready for a family drama that proves karma is real, smash that like button and hit subscribe because this story has more twists than a telenovela. Trust me, you won't want to miss what my parents did when I exposed their darkest secret in front of their entire graduating class. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began, my high school graduation day in 2014. Picture this, I'm 18, valedictorian of Lincoln High, full scholarship to Stanford waiting for me, and I thought I had the perfect family. My parents, Maria and Carlos Rodriguez, owned a successful chain of Mexican restaurants across California. To everyone else, we were the American dream personified, hardworking immigrants who'd built an empire. That morning I woke up in our sprawling house in Beverly Hills, the same house where I'd spent countless nights studying while my parents worked late at their restaurants. I remember putting on my cap and gown, feeling so proud that I'd made them proud. 4 years of straight A's, student council president, debate team captain, I'd done everything to be the perfect daughter. The graduation ceremony was beautiful. When they called my name as valedictorian, I saw my parents in the crowd and my dad was actually crying. My mom was recording everything on her phone, beaming with pride. In my speech, I thanked them for sacrificing so much to give me opportunities they never had. I talked about how they taught me that family was everything, that blood was thicker than water, that we always had each other's backs no matter what. After the ceremony, we went to dinner at Casa Rodriguez, their flagship restaurant. The whole extended family was there, aunts, uncles, cousins, even my abuela who'd flown in from Mexico City. Everyone was celebrating not just my graduation but the fact that I was the first Rodriguez to go to college. I felt like I was floating on air. But then 3 days later, everything changed. I was in my room packing for Stanford orientation when my parents called me downstairs. They were sitting at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd had family dinners every Sunday for years, and they looked different, cold, distant. "Celeste," my father began, his voice flat and emotionless, "we need to talk." My mother wouldn't even look at me. She was staring at her hands, twisting her wedding ring around her finger, a nervous habit I'd noticed since childhood. "We've made a decision," he continued. "About your future." I sat down confused. "What kind of decision? You're not going to Stanford." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What, Dad? What are you talking about? I have a full scholarship. Everything's arranged." "We're withdrawing our support," my mother finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Financial and otherwise." I stared at them, waiting for the punchline, for them to say "just kidding" and laugh about this cruel joke. But their faces remained stone-cold serious. "I don't understand," I said, my voice cracking. "Why? What did I do wrong?" My father stood up abruptly. "You didn't do anything wrong. This is just how it has to be." "That's not an answer," I shouted, panic rising in my chest. "You can't just destroy my future without explaining why." My mother finally looked at me then, and what I saw in her eyes still haunts me. Guilt, yes, but also something that looked like fear. "Pack your things," she said quietly. "You have until tomorrow morning." "Pack my things? Where am I supposed to go?" "That's your problem now," my father said, walking toward the door. "You're 18. You're an adult. Figure it out." I spent that entire night calling relatives, begging for explanations for somewhere to stay. But it was like my parents had reached out to everyone first. My aunts and uncles who'd just been celebrating with me 3 days earlier now claimed they couldn't help. My cousins stopped returning my calls. Even my abuela, my own grandmother who'd always called me her little star, told me she couldn't get involved in family business. The next morning I stood in our driveway with 2 suitcases and a backpack, watching my parents' house, my home, disappear behind me as I walked away. I had $347 in my savings account, no car and nowhere to go. I'll never forget turning back one last time to see if maybe they were watching from the window, if maybe this was all some terrible test and they'd come running after me. But the house was dark, and the only movement I saw was my mother's silhouette quickly stepping away from the upstairs window. That's when I knew this wasn't temporary. This wasn't some tough love lesson. This was abandonment, pure and simple. I used my last $20 to take a bus to downtown LA, where I spent my first night as a homeless teenager, sleeping in a 24-hour laundromat. As I lay there on those hard plastic chairs, surrounded by the smell of detergent and the sound of washing machines, I made myself a promise: I would survive this. I would build something bigger than anything they'd ever imagined. And someday I would find out why they destroyed my life. What I didn't know then was that their betrayal wasn't random cruelty, it was desperation. They were protecting a secret so explosive that they were willing to sacrifice their own daughter to keep it buried. A secret that, when I finally uncovered it 10 years later, would give me the perfect weapon for revenge. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, let me tell you about the decade of hell that followed, and how I clawed my way from sleeping in laundromats to building a multi-million-dollar empire, all while planning the perfect payback. Those first few months after my parents abandoned me were the darkest period of my life. I bounced between homeless shelters, youth hostels, and occasionally the couches of acquaintances who took pity on me. Stanford had held my spot for exactly 30 days before giving my scholarship to someone else. Watching that opportunity slip away felt like losing a limb. But here's what my parents didn't count on: they'd raised me to be a fighter. I got my first job at a 24-hour diner called Mel's, working the graveyard shift for minimum wage plus tips. The owner, a gruff ex-Marine named Eddie, didn't ask too many questions when I showed up looking for work. I told him I was between situations and he gave me a chance. That job saved my life. Not just financially but mentally. It gave me purpose, routine, and hope that maybe I could claw my way out of this nightmare. During my breaks, I'd sit in the corner booth with a notebook writing business plans. I studied every successful restaurant I could find online, analyzed their menus, their marketing, their customer service. I was obsessed with understanding what made some places thrive while others failed. Working at Mel's taught me the restaurant business from the ground up: inventory management, food costs, dealing with difficult customers, managing staff turnover. After 6 months at Mel's, I'd saved enough money to rent a tiny studio apartment in East LA. It was barely bigger than a closet, but it was mine. I enrolled in community college, taking business classes during the day and working nights at the diner. I slept maybe 4 hours a night, lived on ramen noodles and whatever food I could sneak from Mel's, but I was building something. My break came during my second year of community college. I was taking a marketing class and our final project was to create a business plan for a startup. While my classmates were proposing app ideas and retail stores, I had a different vision: a food truck specializing in authentic Mexican street food with a modern twist. But this wasn't just any food truck concept. I'd noticed something during my time in various LA neighborhoods: there was a huge gap in the market. The Mexican food being served in most places was either fast food garbage or overpriced fusion nonsense that bore no resemblance to real Mexican cuisine. Meanwhile, the most authentic places were hidden in neighborhoods where non-Spanish speakers were afraid to venture. My concept was simple: bring authentic, high-quality Mexican street food to areas where people craved it but couldn't access it. Use social media to build a following. Create an experience, not just a meal. My professor, Dr. Sarah Chen was blown away by my presentation. She connected me with a small business incubator program specifically designed for women entrepreneurs. That's where I met my future business partner and best friend Zoe Martinez, a graphic designer who dropped out of UCLA due to family financial problems. Zoe and I clicked immediately. She understood the struggle, the feeling of having your dreams derailed by circumstances beyond your control. Together we refined my food truck concept into something even bigger. We called it Corazon Móvil Mobile Heart. Getting the initial funding was brutal. Bank after bank rejected our loan applications. We were too young, too inexperienced, too risky. But Dr. Chen introduced us to Rosa Delgado, a successful Latina entrepreneur who'd built and sold 3 companies. Rosa saw something in us that the banks couldn't hunger, not just for food but for success. She gave us our first $50,000 investment, enough to buy and retrofit our first food truck. In return, she wanted 20% equity and mentorship rights. It was the best deal we ever made. Our first day on the street, we parked outside the UCLA campus and sold out in 2 hours. Word spread like wildfire on social media. Students were posting pictures of our tacos, calling them life-changing and better than anything in Mexico City. Within a month, we had lines stretching around the block wherever we parked. But I wasn't content with just 1 truck. I had bigger plans. Using the profits from our first truck, we bought a second, then a third. I hired kids from the neighborhoods I'd grown up in, paying them twice minimum wage and offering them equity stakes if they stayed with us for more than a year. I remembered what it felt like to be desperate and hungry, and I wasn't going to exploit anyone the way I'd been exploited. By my 3rd year in business, we had 12 trucks operating across Southern California. I'd transferred to USC, finishing my business degree, while running a company that was generating over $2 million in annual revenue. Zoe had expanded into catering, and we were being featured in food magazines and invited to festivals across the country. But the real breakthrough came when Anthony Bourdain discovered us. I'll never forget that day. I was working the lunch rush at our Beverly Hills truck when this tall, lanky guy with graying hair walked up and ordered 3 different tacos without looking at the menu. He ate them slowly, thoughtfully, while I watched nervously from the window. When he finished, he asked to speak to the owner. That, he said, pointing to his empty plate, is what Mexican food should taste like in America. Who taught you to cook? My grandmother, I lied smoothly. The truth was, I'd taught myself everything using YouTube videos and food blogs, but I wasn't about to admit that to Anthony Bourdain. 3 months later, we were featured on his show. Sales exploded overnight. Investors started calling. Franchise opportunities poured in from across the country. By age 25, I was worth $8 million and owned 47 Corazon Móvil locations across 6 states. I'd been featured on the cover of Entrepreneur magazine as one of 30, under 30 to watch. Food Network wanted to give me my own show. I had everything I'd ever dreamed of and more. But success didn't heal the wound my parents had left. If anything, it made it deeper. Every accomplishment felt hollow because the people who should have been proudest weren't there to see it. Every magazine cover, every award, every milestone, I imagined them seeing it and regretting what they'd done. That's when I decided it was time to find out why they'd destroyed my life. And what I discovered would give me the perfect weapon for revenge. By 2022, I had the resources to dig into my family's past in ways I never could as a broke teenager. I hired a private investigator named Marcus Webb, a former FBI agent who specialized in financial crimes and family secrets. I told him I wanted to know everything about my parents' business dealings, their finances, their relationships, everything they'd hidden from me. Sometimes the truth is worse than the mystery, Marcus warned me during our first meeting. Are you sure you want to go down this road? I looked at him across the mahogany table in my downtown LA office, thinking about all those nights I'd slept in shelters while my parents lived in their Beverly Hills mansion. I've been wondering why they threw me away for 8 years. I need to know. Marcus's investigation took 6 months, and cost me $75,000, but what he uncovered was worth every penny. It started with financial records that didn't add up. Your parents' restaurant empire, Marcus explained. Spreading documents across my conference table wasn't as successful as it appeared. In fact, by 2014 they were hemorrhaging money. 3 of their 5 locations were operating at a loss. They had creditors circling, the IRS was investigating them for tax evasion, and they were about 6 months away from bankruptcy. That was shocking enough, but Marcus was just getting started. But here's where it gets interesting, he continued, pulling out a thick folder. In July 2014, just 2 weeks after your graduation, they received a massive cash injection. $5 million transferred from an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. My blood went cold. 2 weeks after my graduation, that's exactly when they kicked me out. Gets better, Marcus said grimly. The money came from Vicente Morales. I knew that name. Uncle Vicente, my father's older brother, and the black sheep of the Rodriguez family. The one we never talked about. The one who'd supposedly moved to Mexico when I was 12 and never came back for holidays or family gatherings. Vicente didn't move to Mexico, Marcus continued. He's been living in Los Angeles this whole time, running a very successful and very illegal operation, money laundering specifically. He takes dirty money from drug cartels and cleans it through legitimate businesses. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but I wasn't prepared for what came next. Your parents didn't just take Vicente's money to save their restaurants, Marcus said, his voice gentle but firm. They became his partners. Every Rodriguez restaurant location has been laundering money for the Morales cartel for the past 8 years. I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process what he was telling me. My parents, who'd raised me to be honest, hardworking, respectful of the law, were criminals. Had been criminals for most of my adult life. But why abandon me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. What does any of this have to do with throwing me out? Marcus pulled out a final document, a recording transcript. This is from a wiretap the FBI placed on Vicente's phone in 2014. They were investigating him, but they never had enough evidence to make charges stick. Listen to this conversation between Vicente and your father, recorded on July 15, 2014. He pressed play on a small recording device, and my father's voice filled the room. She's too smart, Vicente. Too honest. If she stays in this house, she'll figure it out eventually. Vicente's voice. So what are you saying, Carlos? I'm saying she can't be here when we start the operation. She asks too many questions about the business. She's going to Stanford, she'll study business, she'll want to be involved in the restaurants. We can't risk it. You're talking about your daughter Hermano. I'm talking about protecting our family, all of us. If she finds out what we're doing, she'll either turn us in or become an accessory. I won't let either of those things happen, Vicente. So you'll just throw her out? I'll set her free. She's smart enough to survive on her own. And this way, when the FBI comes sniffing around, and they will, she's completely clean, no connection to any of this. The recording ended, and I sat there feeling like someone had ripped my heart out through my throat. They hadn't abandoned me out of cruelty or indifference. They'd abandoned me to protect themselves and their criminal operation. But that wasn't even the worst part. Marcus had one more revelation that would change everything I thought I knew about my family. There's something else, he said, pulling out a birth certificate I'd never seen before. This is your original birth certificate from when you were born. I looked at the document, confused. The names were right, Celeste Rodriguez, born June 15, 1996. But there was something different about it. Look at the father's name, Marcus said. I looked closer and my world tilted off its axis. The father listed wasn't Carlos Rodriguez. It was Vicente Morales. That's impossible, I said, shaking my head. Carlos is my father. I look like him. I have his eyes, You have the Morales family eyes, Marcus interrupted gently. Carlos and Vicente are brothers. The resemblance isn't surprising. He pulled out DNA test results tests he'd somehow obtained samples for. Vicente Morales is your biological father. Carlos Rodriguez is your uncle who raised you. The room was spinning. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my family, my identity, it was all a lie. Your mother had an affair with Vicente when she was married to Carlos, Marcus explained. When she got pregnant, they decided to raise you as Carlos's daughter to avoid scandal. But Vicente never stopped being part of your life, he just did it from the shadows. Every birthday present that came from anonymous family friends, every time your parents mysteriously had extra money for your school trips or activities, that was Vicente. I thought about all those times growing up when my parents would have hushed conversations that stopped when I entered the room. All those business meetings my father would have with his associates. The way my mother would sometimes look at me with such guilt in her eyes. So when they needed Vicente's money to save their businesses, I said, working through the logic, he had a condition. Exactly. Vicente insisted they couldn't put you at risk. You were his daughter even if you didn't know it. He wouldn't help them unless they got you completely out of the picture first. Now I understood the fear I'd seen in my mother's eyes that night they kicked me out. They weren't just destroying my future, they were breaking their own hearts to protect me from a world I didn't even know existed. But understanding their motivations didn't make what they'd done any less devastating. They'd stolen 10 years of my life, let me think I was worthless and unloved when the truth was exactly the opposite. And now with this information I had something more powerful than money or success. I had the truth. And I knew exactly how to use it to bring their entire world crashing down. The perfect revenge was about to begin, and it would start at their high school reunion where they'd be surrounded by everyone who thought they were pillars of the community. But revenge, I was about to learn, is never as satisfying as you imagine it will be. Sometimes the truth is more complicated than the lies. And sometimes justice comes with a price you never expected to pay. Knowledge is power, but timing is everything. I spent 3 months after Marcus's revelations planning the most devastating comeback in family history. My parents thought they were safe in their world of suburban respectability and criminal profits. They had no idea their abandoned daughter had become a millionaire with access to information that could destroy them. The first step was gathering more evidence. I hired a team of forensic accountants to trace every dirty dollar that had flowed through Rodriguez restaurants. What they found was even worse than I'd imagined. Over 8 years, my parents had laundered nearly $50 million through their 5 restaurant locations. They weren't just accomplices, they were major players in Vicente's operation. I documented everything. Bank transfers, fake supplier invoices, cash transactions that had no legitimate business purpose. I mapped out the entire money laundering scheme with the precision of a federal prosecutor, because that's exactly what I planned to become: their prosecutor, judge, and jury all rolled into one. But I wasn't satisfied with just destroying them legally. That would be too easy, too quick. I wanted them to experience the same public humiliation and social exile they'd subjected me to. I wanted their friends, their community, everyone who looked up to them to see exactly who they really were. That's when I learned about Lincoln High School's class of 1992 30th reunion scheduled for October 15, 2022. My parents had been planning to attend for months. My mother had even posted about it on Facebook, talking about how excited she was to see old friends and show off their successful business empire. Perfect. I bought my ticket online using my real name, Celeste Rodriguez, class of... Well, technically, I never graduated from Lincoln since I went to a different high school, but the reunion organizers didn't check too carefully. They were just happy to have another paid attendee. Next, I needed the perfect outfit. This wasn't just about looking good, it was about making a statement. I commissioned a custom dress from a designer who'd worked with celebrities at award shows. Black silk perfectly tailored with subtle beading that caught the light when I moved. It cost $10,000, which felt appropriate since that was roughly what my parents had spent on their mortgage payment the month they kicked me out. But the dress was just the beginning. I arranged for a photographer to be at the reunion officially to capture candid moments for the alumni newsletter, but really to document the moment my parents' world imploded. I also hired a videographer, ostensibly to create a reunion highlight reel. 3 days before the reunion, I made my first move. I sent anonymous packages to 15 people from my parents' graduating class, the gossips, the social media addicts, the ones who would spread information faster than wildfire. Each package contained a USB drive with selected financial documents showing the Rodriguez restaurant's unusual cash flow patterns, along with a note. Thought you might find this interesting. More to come at the reunion. I didn't include the smoking gun evidence yet, just enough to get people curious and talking. By the morning of the reunion, half the class was buzzing with rumors about Carlos and Maria Rodriguez and their mysterious business dealings. The venue was the Hilton Garden Inn in downtown Riverside, the same place where my parents had held their wedding reception 30 years earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd started their marriage there, and I was about to end their reputation in the same ballroom. I arrived fashionably late, making sure my parents were already there and settled in. I'd been tracking their movements through my mother's enthusiastic Facebook posts all evening. They were sitting at table 6 with their old friends, laughing and sharing stories about the good old days. When I walked through those ballroom doors, the entire room seemed to freeze. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. People stared. My parents' faces went white with shock, then red with panic. I moved through the crowd like I owned the place, which, given what I'd paid for my outfit and preparation, I basically did. People kept trying to place me. I looked familiar, but they couldn't quite figure out why. The resemblance to the Rodriguez family was strong enough to be noticeable, but my success and confidence made me seem like someone from a different world entirely. I made small talk with various classmates, dropping hints about my business success, my restaurants, my complicated family history. All the while I could feel my parents' eyes on me from across the room. They were whispering frantically to each other, probably trying to figure out what I was doing there and what I wanted. The moment I'd been waiting for came during the slideshow presentation. As photos of the class of 1992's achievements flashed on the screen, I stood up and asked for the microphone. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room, "but I have something important to share with everyone." The reunion organizer, confused but polite, handed me the microphone. My parents looked like they were about to have heart attacks. "Many of you might remember the Rodriguez family," I continued, gesturing toward their table. "Successful restaurant owners, pillars of the Hispanic community, living the American dream." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Carlos and Maria were well known in Riverside circles, respected for their business success and community involvement. "What you might not know," I said, my voice growing stronger, "is that I'm their daughter. The daughter they abandoned 10 years ago, right after my high school graduation." The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. "And what you definitely don't know is that their restaurant empire is built on blood money." That's when I nodded to my videographer, who began projecting financial documents onto the screen where class photos had been showing moments before. Bank transfers, suspicious cash deposits, connections to known criminal enterprises, everything Marcus had uncovered presented in neat, undeniable charts and graphs. "For the past 8 years," I continued, "Rodriguez Restaurants has been laundering money for the Morales drug cartel. $50 million in dirty money cleaned through your neighborhood family restaurants." The crowd erupted. People were shouting, phones were coming out to record everything, and my parents were trying desperately to leave. But I wasn't finished. I had one more revelation that would destroy them completely. As my parents tried to push through the crowd toward the exit, I delivered the final blow that would shatter everything they'd built their lives on. "But that's not even the most interesting part of this story," I said into the microphone, my voice carrying over the chaos in the room. "The most interesting part is that Carlos Rodriguez isn't actually my father." That stopped them dead in their tracks. My father, Carlos, turned around slowly, his face a mask of horror and disbelief. My mother looked like she was going to faint. "My real father is Vicente Morales, Carlos's brother and the head of the money laundering operation that's been funding your favorite local restaurants for nearly a decade." I gestured to my videographer again, and new documents appeared on the screen: DNA test results, birth certificates, hospital records that told the whole sordid story. Maria Rodriguez had an affair with her husband's brother, got pregnant, and they all decided to cover it up. They raised me as Carlos's daughter for 18 years, then threw me out like garbage when their criminal activities made my presence inconvenient. The room was in complete uproar now. People were recording everything on their phones, others were trying to call the police, and some were just staring in shock at the unfolding drama. But I wasn't done. I had one more surprise. "And just so we're all clear about the timeline here," I continued, "they didn't just abandon me randomly. They kicked me out specifically so they could start laundering money without risk of me discovering their operation. They chose crime over their own daughter." That's when Carlos finally found his voice. "Celeste, please," he shouted across the room. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." I cut him off. "I understand that you let me sleep in homeless shelters while you lived off drug money. I understand that you let me think I was worthless and unloved while you protected your precious criminal enterprise. I understand that you chose Vicente's dirty money over your daughter's future." I walked toward their table, the crowd parting like the Red Sea. My parents were trapped now, cornered by the crowd's attention and their own guilt. "What I don't understand," I said, stopping directly in front of them, "is how you sleep at night knowing you destroyed an innocent person's life to cover up your crimes." My mother finally spoke, tears streaming down her face. "We thought we were protecting you," she whispered. "We thought if you weren't involved you'd be safe." Safe? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. I was 18 years old, homeless with no family support, no money, and no explanation for why my parents suddenly hated me. "How was that safe?" "We never hated you," Carlos said, his voice breaking. "We loved you so much that we—" "Don't," I snapped. "Don't you dare say you loved me. Love doesn't abandon people. Love doesn't choose money over family. Love doesn't let their child think they're worthless for 10 years. The crowd was completely silent now, transfixed by this family drama playing out in real time. Phones were recording every word, every tear, every moment of this reckoning. "You want to know what real love looks like?" I continued. "Real love is what I did for myself when you threw me away. Real love is working 3 jobs to put myself through college. Real love is building a multi-million-dollar business from nothing. Real love is surviving and thriving despite being betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect me." I pulled out my phone and showed them a photo, my latest Forbes magazine cover, where I'd been featured as one of America's most successful young entrepreneurs. "While you were living off drug money, I was building something legitimate. While you were hiding from the law, I was making the law work for me. While you were destroying lives, I was creating jobs and opportunities for hundreds of people." Carlos looked at the photo and I saw something break in his eyes. Pride, maybe. Or regret. Or both. "We always knew you were special," he said quietly. "We always knew you'd be successful. Then why didn't you stick around to see it?" I demanded. "Why didn't you believe in me enough to find another way because Vicente threatened us?" Maria suddenly burst out. "He said if we didn't get you away from the business, he'd hurt you. He said the cartels don't leave loose ends, and if you found out about the money laundering, they'd see you as a threat." This was news to me. Marcus's investigation hadn't uncovered any direct threats. "He told us we had to choose," she continued, sobbing now. lose you temporarily to keep you safe or keep you close and risk you getting killed when the operation inevitably got exposed. I stared at her processing this new information. It didn't excuse what they'd done, but it added a layer of complexity I hadn't expected. So you chose to destroy my life to save it, I asked. We chose to break our own hearts to keep yours beating, Carlos said, tears in his eyes. We've regretted it every single day for 10 years. We've watched your success from afar, we've celebrated every achievement even though we couldn't be part of it. We never stopped loving you, Celeste. We just stopped being able to show it. The room was so quiet you could hear people breathing. This wasn't the simple revenge story I'd planned. This was messier, more complicated, more human than I'd anticipated. But I wasn't ready to forgive them yet. Maybe I never would be. Well, I said, my voice steady despite the emotional turmoil. Now you don't have to worry about protecting me anymore. Because, as of tomorrow morning, the FBI will have everything they need to shut down your operation and Vicente's. All of it. Every transaction, every laundered dollar, every crime you've committed for the past 8 years. Their faces went pale again. And the best part, I'm completely clean. Just like you wanted. The aftermath of that reunion was swift and devastating for them. Within 48 hours, FBI agents raided all 5 Rodriguez restaurant locations simultaneously. The local news ran footage of my parents being led away in handcuffs, their successful business empire revealed as a house of cards built on drug money. Vicente Morales was arrested at his Beverly Hills mansion the same day. Turns out the FBI had been building a case against him for years, but could never quite connect all the dots. My evidence provided the missing pieces they needed to bring down the entire operation. The media had a field day with the story. Local restaurant empire, built on drug money. Daughter exposes parents' criminal operation, the revenge that brought down a cartel. For weeks my parents' mugshots were on the front page of every local newspaper. But here's what surprised me most, I didn't feel the satisfaction I'd expected. Watching my parents face federal charges, seeing their friends and community turn their backs on them, witnessing the destruction of everything they'd built, it felt hollow. Empty. During their trial, more details emerged about the threats Vicente had made. The FBI testified that the Morales cartel had indeed killed family members of people who'd crossed them or posed security risks. My parents' fear for my safety had been real and justified. It didn't excuse their choice to abandon me, but it explained it in ways that made me question everything I thought I knew about justice and revenge. Carlos received 8 years in federal prison. Maria got 6 years due to her more limited involvement. Vicente got life without parole. Their restaurants were seized by the government, their assets frozen, their reputations destroyed forever. I attended every day of their trial, sitting in the back of the courtroom watching the people who'd raised me face the consequences of their choices. On the final day after the sentences were read, my mother turned around and looked directly at me. "I'm proud of you," she mouthed silently, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so proud of who you became." That's when I finally broke down and cried, not tears of victory but tears of grief for the family we might have been if they'd made different choices. 6 months after their sentencing, I did something that surprised everyone, including myself. I visited my parents in prison. The conversation was awkward, painful, and necessary. We talked for hours about the choices they'd made, the fear they'd lived with, the regret that had consumed them for years. For the first time in over a decade, they told me they loved me not as an excuse or manipulation but as a simple truth they'd never stopped feeling. I told them about my business, about the success I'd built from nothing, about the life I'd created without them. I also told them about the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, wondering what I'd done wrong, about the years of therapy it had taken to believe I was worthy of love. We didn't fix everything in that conversation. Some wounds run too deep for easy healing. But we started the process of understanding each other, of acknowledging the pain we'd all carried for so long. Today, 3 years later, my parents are still in prison, but our relationship is slowly rebuilding. I visit them monthly, and they've become genuine sources of advice and support for my business decisions. It's strange and complicated, but it's real in a way our relationship never was when I was growing up. I've also met Vicente, my biological father, twice since his arrest. Those conversations were even more complicated than the ones with my parents. He's proud of what I've accomplished, claims he always loved me from afar, insists everything he did was to protect me. But he's also a criminal who's destroyed countless lives through his drug operations. I'm still processing what it means to be related to someone like that. As for my business, Corazon Móvil has expanded into 32 states and generates over $50 million in annual revenue. I've opened a nonprofit organization that provides business loans and mentorship to young people who've aged out of foster care or been abandoned by their families. Because I know what it's like to have to build everything from nothing with no safety net. The irony isn't lost on me that I'm now generating legitimate revenue equivalent to what my parents laundered illegally. The difference is that my money feeds families instead of fueling violence, creates opportunities instead of destroying lives, builds communities instead of tearing them apart. People often ask me if I regret exposing my parents, if I think the punishment fits the crime, if I would do it all again knowing what I know now. The answer is complicated. I regret that it came to that. I regret that they made choices that forced me into an impossible situation. I regret the pain we've all endured and the time we've lost. But I don't regret standing up for myself, and I don't regret demanding accountability for their actions. Sometimes, families break in ways that can't be fixed. Sometimes love isn't enough to overcome the damage we do to each other. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones who claim to love us most. But sometimes, just sometimes, truth and time can create space for something new to grow from the ashes of what was destroyed. My story doesn't have a neat happy ending because real life isn't a fairy tale. It has a complicated ongoing ending where people are learning to live with the consequences of their choices and trying to build something better from the pieces that remain. What I've learned is that the best revenge isn't destroying the people who hurt you, it's becoming someone so successful, so fulfilled, so genuinely happy that their opinion of you becomes irrelevant. The best revenge is proving that they couldn't break you no matter what they took away. So what do you think? Have you ever discovered family secrets that changed everything you thought you knew about your relatives? Has anyone in your family ever had to choose between protecting someone and telling them the truth? How do you balance justice with forgiveness when the people who hurt you are the same people who raised you? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and your perspectives always help me process my own complicated feelings about family, loyalty, and second chances. If this story resonated with you, smash that like button and hit subscribe, because family drama is universal, but finding the strength to rebuild after betrayal is something we all need to learn. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they can survive anything their family puts them through. And remember, blood may be thicker than water, but character is thicker than blood. The family you choose and the person you become matter more than the circumstances you started with. Thank you for listening to my story, and here's to all of us who've had to learn that sometimes the most important family reunion is the one you have with yourself when you finally realize you're enough just as you are, regardless of who stays or goes. Until next time, keep building your own empire, and never let anyone convince you that their limitations should become your reality.